So I see lots of people mocking and commenting on who they should pick in Jacksonville and making it all about 2024 and 2024 alone. That's a mistake. That's a big mistake, and I'll tell you why on this episode of Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up? It's Tony Wiggins here, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. I got to let you know that we're free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. Just go over to YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And once you get there, hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you listen to your audio versions of the podcast, make sure you tap in every single day at that location to make sure you do not miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day, and you can be an everydayer if you do the exact same thing. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to put this thing together. We'll pick it apart and put it back together a little bit. The draft is coming up, and I'm seeing everybody is all into their mocks. Everybody's invested. Everyone's doing the homework. Folks are doing film study. Man, it's like the stuff that I have been doing for the last 35 years on all of these little legal pads and tablets that I had all over the utility closet in my house. Now everybody and their brother's doing the same thing, and I absolutely love it. I'm not one of those dudes either that gets mad that everything is at the tip of your fingertips. I'm not upset that you didn't have to work as hard as I had to and write everything down like Einstein, but it's all good. We crawl so you can walk, and we walk so you can run here on Locked On Jaguars. No jealousy, no hate. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go with this. Do you pick for a year or pick for a career? I think you pick for a career. And sometimes picking for a year, you are picking for a career. Sometimes in picking for a career, you end up picking for a year. But if you try to pick for a year without thinking about a career, you ain't going to have a long career. That's going to be a tragic mistake, and you're going to do yourself a disservice. So I hope y'all got all of that. You know, I hope you there's a rap beef going on, so I got to get all hip hop on you and make all of these words rhyme a little bit. All right, I'm going to tell you why I think that you need to pick for a career as opposed to picking for a year if you can help it. And third and final segment, is there a way that you can come to a little bit of a compromise and find a way to do both? Let's get into it. So many people that I respect here in Jacksonville are sitting here and they're talking about this pick, and they're going back and forth. And it's, man, what should we do? We should do this and we should do that. And I always warn people to not get into the we should draft this position in this round, that position in that round, and the third position in the third round. When you start doing that, first of all, I ain't telling you what to do. You can do it if you want to do. But I just think when you start doing that and you make that a practice, you kind of put yourself into a situation where you're thinking about positions as squares that need to get filled, and you don't think about the individual player and the talent and the person. It's like saying you need a running back, but then, okay, well, if Derrick Henry's there, I'll take Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry ain't the type of person that you just take just because he's a running back. Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. So when you take a running back, you get a running back. But when you specifically take Derrick Henry as your running back, that means you're going to commit to a certain type of football, a certain mentality, a certain way of doing things, and that is what it is. So that's why I like to think that we have to start putting faces on these positions. We have to put names on these positions, because I do think the bad teams get in situations where they're very formulaic in the way they go about their business. And what they do is they say, we're going to get this, we're going to get that, and we're going to get this. And they forget about the people. They forget about the attitude. They forget about the guy who comes with it. They forget about the determination, the heart, the guts, the professionalism. That's why I went Quinyon Mitchell. That's why I told you last week, if you were listening to the podcast, that's who I would take. And then I named individual people in the second and the third round, even went so far as to go into the fourth and the fifth round where I named people and I named individuals, because it is about getting guys that are going to fit together as a team, getting guys that are going to fit together into eventually creating some sort of identity that this team can be known for, the one that has been so elusive. And even the management tells you, we don't know who we are. We're sitting there waiting for the light to come on and it never pops on and all of that stuff. Yeah. Light doesn't have to come on when you know who you are. You can walk around the house in the dark. Don't let me get started now on the fraternity stuff. But yeah, you don't have to have the lights on to be able to move around in your own house. Unless you got to always go look in the mirror to remind yourself of who you are and what you look like. And that's what the Jaguars have had to do for so long. So it's not just for me about getting this here and getting that here. The only time I think like that is when they have an abundance of needs, and in looking at the boards, you realize there's something there early that you won't be able to get late. And then if another position, there's a whole bunch of depth at that spot, and there are really, really good players at that spot later, you may be able to hold off as long as some of the guys that you really, really like individually are grouped into those little areas, into those little pockets. You may be able to hold off, but you might not be able to hold off if you want a certain player and you know that that particular individual will not be around the next time you make a selection. And there's nothing you can do to make it, to give you any consolation about the fact that that individual isn't there when you pick later. You got to get the guy you just cannot afford not to take. You just tell yourself, and this is something that's not necessarily true, but you kind of tell yourself this a little bit. Okay, you're sitting there, right? You got to pick somebody. Which dude don't you want to go to your rival? Because you got to assume that if you don't take him, your rival's going to take him next. Who do you want that you don't want to coach against? If you say both of them, I'll say, well, which one don't you want to coach against the most? And who's going to help you? And who's going to have you help less if you let him go to the other team? Sometimes you just got to do that, man. You can't look at this thing as a one-year deal. Looking at it as a one-year deal can get you in trouble. I'm gonna tell you why you can't do that. And it's really not something. I'm not gonna be sitting here and be a team building snob. I'm gonna really sit here and explain to you why you can't do it. It's gonna make so much sense to everybody. It's gonna make so much sense as to why you can't do it. And I'm gonna make sure I get to it. I'm gonna do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by BetterHelp. Therapy has helped me in many, many ways, and I'm sure it could help you as well. Dealing with things like loss of life and changes in my medical condition can really, really lead you into a state of depression. Like I had a bout with depression myself. And then once you come out of it, man, trying to find the time to do everything with all of the people that you love can also create a little bit of anxiety. And then you need help with that also. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try, because I'm going to tell you what, trying to figure out how to use your time wisely and to figure out a way to do all of the things with all of the people you love can be really, really a tough task, especially when things have changed for you. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. All right, second segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. A pick for a career or a pick for a year? I'm going for a pick for a career. Now, that does not mean that you can sit here and ignore team need. It's not what I'm telling you. What I'm saying is when you have multiple team needs, how do you prioritize which one you need to address first? I say just always go to which player on the board represents the best player, the guy that you have to have at one of those need positions. And I just go with that. Even if his position on your team is stronger than the other ones, and the help that you may need may be depth. It may be a year from now. It may be, well, you can always use more guys in that spot as an edge rusher or a defensive tackle because you're going to do a lot of rotating. You do way more rotating on the defensive line than you do the offensive line, because the offensive line, you want that continuity, and those guys got to be in step. So, yeah, if there's a defensive lineman or an edge that won't give me starters minutes at this point in the Jaguars' development, you damn right I'll take him at 17. I might not take him at number 1, because when you're picking that high, I'm sure that at one of those other premium positions, you have room for a dude that's number 1 to come in and play right away. Now, if you're up there and Jalen Carter's on the board, you take him regardless. You take him regardless. And the reason why I'm talking like this is because the Jaguars are in a position at 17 where there's going to be one of those positions that's a position of need that has not been properly addressed in the draft. And the Jaguars are going to either get the first or the second best player in that position group. Or, they could very well get, I don't think they're going to get wide receiver 2 by sitting at 17. They could get wide receiver 4, who's a pretty good player. Whoever that is for them, there's a chance that they could get edge 2 and cornerback 2 at 17 because of the way the draft might fall. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a run on quarterbacks. You're going to get those first 3 receivers off the board. I think a tight end is going to go before them with Brock Bowers. And then what's going to happen is they're either going to be in a position to get wide receiver 4, cornerback 2, defensive tackle 1, or edge number 2. They're going to be in a position to get a really, really good player at a position that they could use more help. They also could be in a position to get offensive tackle 4. And in this year's draft, that's a pretty good football player. So, yeah, the Jaguars appear to be a team that, unless something crazy happens and somebody gets too close to them, like if O'Dunes falls out of the top 10, the Jaguars are going to be in a position to probably try to move up. But they are a prime team to move down. They are a prime team to move down. Especially now I'm hearing that him too, but I'm hearing that Michael Penix might be the 5th quarterback taken before the Jaguars pick at 17. And that would be very, very good for them. Because now, if you get 5 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, that's 8 people. You get a tight end, that's 9. Let's just say you get one of those edge rushers, that's 10. Now, if you're the Jaguars, you only got 7 picks in front of you, and a lot of those guys that got picked, like all those quarterbacks and the tight end, you weren't going to take them anyway. I'm telling you, the Jaguars are going to be sitting there, and it's going to be defensive tackle 1 or defensive tackle 2, cornerback 2, maybe cornerback 3, wide receiver 4, and offensive tackle maybe 3 or 4. And they're going to have a decision to make. Maybe edge 2 is even around, or edge 3. And that's just me talking about a consensus list. What about their own list? What if there's somebody they really, really, really like, and they're like, look, I wonder if they have a board over there, or this thought like, look, we don't really need him as much today, but he's just too good. If he gets to us, we got to take him. I wonder if it's like an Amarius Mims. If they're looking at him going, he's just too good to pass up, man. I wonder if it's Darius Robinson, to be honest. Another big, long, bulky traits guy. I wonder if it's somebody like that where they're saying, we could just do absolute overkill and make our team so good, it's not even funny. And those are picks that if they decided to do it and they say, you know what, we're going to ride with Cam one more year, we're going to move Anton over, and then we'll have we'll have Mims ready to go. He's ready to go this year if somebody gets hurt, but we'll really have Mims ready to go. We can book in and protect Trevor forever. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to get angry if that's what happens. You can't, man. You can't. I told you I was going to tell you why it's problematic if your team is picking for a year. What if they change GMs after one season? You see why you don't do it? At least if the GM can just be cookie cutter honest and can just go, we're just going to take the best player regardless of position, and we're going to do it for the organization, right? Well, what that does is that sets up the next staff. And there are people and there are positions that are, I wouldn't call them positionless, but I will say they fit anywhere. A guy like Trayvon Walker fits anywhere. A guy like Anton Harrison fits anywhere. If you drafted Amarius Mims, he fits in anywhere. I mean, ain't nobody going to take over the job next year and get mad that they got a 6'7", 345-pound, 22-year-old offensive tackle. Nobody. So cover corners. There are things that you can just do for your franchise that are the best things moving forward, as opposed to thinking about lining up the next season. See, one of the reasons that I wasn't upset that Trent Baalke moved the way that he moved in the offseason and that Trent Baalke was able to do some of the things that he did in the offseason, because at the very least, with the signings that the Jaguars made, they will be able to line up. They can go line up tomorrow and play. Now, there's areas where they can improve, sure. There's also areas where it may not seem like they can improve, but they learned their lesson about thinking that you've arrived at any area and not go ahead and improve it. I'm telling you, there's a chance if they add another defensive lineman and if they hit on him, there's a chance the Jaguars could have a top 5 defensive line unit in the National Football League. And I mean a solid top 5 unit, one that makes people shake every single week. They have a chance to do that. They have a chance to get significantly better at wide receiver, but they can do that without taking a guy on day one. They have a chance to get significantly better at cornerback. I think they need to take a dude on day one if they're going to really, really affect that area the way that we think, even though that they can. Of course, there's always going to be guys on day 2 and day 3, but Trent Baalke does better on day 1. He just does better on day 1. I'm going to tell you how you can find a way to do both. How can you find a way to do both? Draft for need, but also get the right player. Get the right player for more than just need for your future also. Let me tell you about this, though. It's Locked On NFL Mock Draft Live on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the Free Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 o'clock Eastern Time to hear who the local experts are picking for every NFL franchise. With live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle, the Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or in the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Can the Jaguars find a way to do both draft for a career and get a guy that can help them next year? I'll tell you that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Got to tell you about the Gametime app, man. That's right, Gametime. When you want tickets to an event, but you are like me sometimes and you procrastinate, usually you hear stuff like, your lack of planning is not my emergency. You will hear no such thing like that at Gametime, because Gametime specializes in people that sit around and wait too long to buy tickets, just like me and you, right? They prioritize last-minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guaranteed. Hey, man, just take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL, all one word, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Third and final segment here of Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen, as always, getting prepped and primed up for the NFL draft. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of folks talking about whether or not the Jaguars can really get help from a first-year receiver and whether or not they can afford to use a pick on a guy that's not going to start necessarily for this season. They need contributions right away. All of that sounds good until you think about the fact that maybe, just maybe, the Jaguars also just need to try to get the best player that they can possibly get at a need position. One where you can contribute this year. One where we can say he won't start, but then he goes out there and he beats somebody out. Guess what? What if they get a defensive tackle, right? And you just can't keep him off the field. And he outplays everybody who's in front of him. What if they get Michael Hall? I'm serious, at 17, or they move back and they take Michael Hall, and he just outplays everybody in training camp. I mean, he's like unblockable. He's unblockable. He's just dominating. What's the worst thing that can happen? Folks will say, man, they got somebody on the roster, they overpaid. They gave Devon Hamilton an extension, and this dude then came and beat him out. But you still have Devon Hamilton. You just have what I just described. You having a Pro Bowl level type player on the interior that's so good that you got to play him as a rookie. You see how you think something is a problem and it's not really a problem? It's really like a solution. You have somebody that plays above the X's and O's, that makes everybody better, that makes the room better. Unless you're sitting here right now with a first ballot Hall of Famer at any position out there, with the exception of quarterback, I'm telling you, the Jaguars could use a player if he's very, very good and he turns out to be outstanding. Nobody will care anything about positional value. Nobody will care anything about need. No one will care that they needed somebody else more than they needed him. The only thing you'll think about is the Jaguars got a dude that looked like he might be going to Canton after one season. What if they got a player that had like the impact of Michael Parsons? Would you get upset that they didn't really need somebody like Michael Parsons? No, you probably wouldn't. And that's the point that I'm making. The point is we can paralyze ourselves with analysis about the draft and how teams are supposed to do things and what they're supposed to do. That doesn't necessarily quantify us to understand how we're going to feel if the player that they get turns out to be really good, even if it's at a position that wasn't a priority need. If they draft a wide receiver and he doesn't start the year as one of their top 3 receivers, but by the end of the season, he's one of the best rookie receivers in the league, and the outlook for him looks like he's going to be a star, and he just happened to be a 6'3" guy who can play the X wide receiver spot, you won't be upset at all. I mentioned if they took Amarius Mims and somebody got hurt in training camp and they moved Anton Harrison to left tackle and Mims starts at right tackle, and now your man Trevor Lawrence is standing back there doing his taxes when he drops back, and nobody can get to him because Mims and Anton Harrison look like 2 mountains blocking for him. Nobody's going to be mad at all. What if they get another edge rusher like Jared Verse falls to him, and now they're running lightning packages? They got Trayvon in the middle with Verse, and they got Josh Allen on the outside, and you got 3 dudes that all end up with 10 sacks or more, like 12, 12, and 11. Ain't nobody going to be mad that Jared Verse didn't start, because you'll get the impact and you'll get the production. And that's something I think we lose sometimes. We lose sight of the fact that the goal is to use positional value and to use need to make the best choice you can make per value. However, the ultimate goal is to make sure you get the guy that you want. But you have to identify the people that you want, not necessarily the position that they play. You identify the people you want, not necessarily the positions. You look at the position of need, you find the best players. Hopefully those players line up with need. And if they do, now you prioritize need based on, I hope you do it based on how good the players are and not so much as how big the need is. Because it just so happens if you go for a player based on the need and you use that first, then maybe your rival that doesn't need that guy realizes they need him now because he's just too good to pass up, and they take him, and now you got to play against him forever. Those are the things that I think we have to kind of ponder and think about and realize that the actions that we have now before the draft won't even make sense and will totally be irrelevant after the draft, because as soon as the draft pick is made, everybody's going to try to find a way and a reason to make sure that they can comprehend and understand how that guy's going to be good, not only in the short term or the interim, but in the long term to be able to help the organization be all they can be. So that's it, man. I like breaking this down. I think the Jaguars can find a way to do both. But I really hope that at the end of all of this, that they lead with getting the best player, not filling the biggest hole for one season. Just take the best guy, man. Take the best guy and just hope and pray that those other needs, if you didn't fix them all, you ain't got to fix them all on day one of the draft. So on day one of the draft, just make sure you take the best guy. Don't use that to try to fill holes that you didn't fill. Take the best player. All right, man. Make sure you tap in on April 17th and watch our Locked On NFL Draft that we'll be having. It'll be live on our YouTube channel. But Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. You guys make sure you take care of each other, man. Keep swinging for the fences with those drafts. Hit me up. Let me know how you guys are doing. Until the next time, we'll see you here on Locked On Jaguars.